All right, guys, we're here alongside John McCarthy, professor here at Montclair State University, longtime coach. Appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure.
We want to talk today a little bit about helping these kids get better, facing adversity, how to deal with failure, and then obviously the parents that come into play and kind of putting a damper on it for the kids and the whole experience for them. So throughout your experience coaching, what do you feel has been the number one kind of thing that's put a damper on it for these young kids?
I think, it's going to sound crazy, but I think television. There's an overexposure. When I was going to school with Abe Lincoln in the Conestoga wagon, we only had one baseball game of the week. Now you have doubleheaders every night. And they kind of lose their impact because there's such a proliferation of them. In addition to that, a lot of people see so many successful people, and they try to put that down each level. And if they think that people don't copy, they're not paying attention. I mean, I'll see little leaguers that will put their hand back like this when they're in the batter's box, which is what Derek Jeter used to do. So they're copying. And I think also we're really becoming focused on the outcome and not the process. Winning is paramount. Even in terms of our country, America, we're number one. Well, if you want to break it down in a lot of categories, we're not even close to number one. But that's a mindset. And we're always saying that everybody has to hit their peak. You can't be average anymore. And unfortunately, most people are average.
Right. Well, you mentioned too the importance of focusing on the process rather than the result, and it seems like a lot of kids want that instant result. They want to show up to practice and know that they have accomplished something great today, and sometimes it's a small incremental change that they made that will impact them a little bit farther later on. How could kids show up and know that, hey, I'm going to compete today, do what I can to get better, but I might not see that humongous result right away?
Well, it's very hard for them. This is an instant gratification world that you young people live in. Look at the social media. Kids are so concerned with likes that they'll do anything. And also, because of the computer, you have instant access. If I wanted something in the past when I was in college, I had to go to the library and look it up. You can go right on Google and get it instant. So when you can get the world instantly in the palm of your hand, you expect instant gratification. And, we have people who talk about losers and really belittle them. In the past, it was pretty obvious who was more successful than other people. But now it's like, you're a loser. And kids don't want to get into that. And I think that in most of the things, when you get older, you realize that things are a process and that they're cumulative. Now, I just came from getting some skin cancer removed. Well, it happened when I was a teenager. So it's a long time to understand that. You don't get it instantly. So I think young people don't have a long view of everything. It's an instant gratification society. You wear your sneakers out or you wear your shoes out. You don't go to a shoemaker, you throw them out and you buy another pair. So our society has become more of instant gratification. And so that's the way adults live, and it's been passed down. There's no blurring really between adult and kids anymore because kids are exposed to the same culture that adults are.
Do you feel that sometimes coaches have a difficult time understanding that the athlete is unable to make these adjustments as quickly as they'd like to because they want to win right away, they want to see results, and sometimes they might be putting some extra pressure on the kids because they want to see that quite rapidly?
I think there's two things that go into that. Number one is the ego of the coach himself, and the second thing is that there's a lack of patience when you don't have success. People don't realize that for Mike Krzyzewski, highest number of wins in basketball, they hung him in effigy at the campus in Duke. The same thing with Dean Smith. They wanted to get rid of him. But at that time, people got a longer chance to prove themselves. the guy from the Denver Broncos got fired during the season. So you don't have a chance to prove yourself anymore. And even when you're successful, it's not enough. They had a GoFundMe page at the University of Kentucky to get Calipari to step down. Look at the record that they've had. Look at the guys that he sent on to the pros. Now, he's gotten a lot of flack for the one and done, but the ones went to the NBA. And so he adjusted to the style that was presented to him.
You know, I went through a situation in high school where I was pitching and gave up a couple walks and then gave up a hit and then a run scores. Didn't go my way that inning, unfortunately, but I hear the coach yelling from the dugout, "Look what you did, you blew it, look at this." And all this language that you don't want to hear if you're a pitcher, creating just a difficult situation to navigate through if you're on the field. How important do you believe is communication and understanding that the players need to have trust in you and need to find a way to get through those situations knowing their coach has their back?
Well, communication is not just the exchange of comments, okay? It means that the sender has to have a receiver who's willing to listen, and the sender has to be sending a message that the receiver can use. One of the examples I used, I was coaching very early on in my career, and the coach from the other team, and there's not a lot of people at a baseball game, goes out and halfway out he's saying, "Tommy, what the hell are you doing? Throw strikes." And Tommy's like, "Oh, really? Is that what I'm supposed to be out here to do?" So the criticism has to be specific, okay, in what you're doing. And it shouldn't be public, okay? Again, if it's something that I can continue to do, fine. But if it's something that's gone on and you're giving me a general comment like, "Look what you've done to us," I could say to you, your pitches are all high, all right? Try to extend your stride a little bit, and that'll bring your arm down.
Right.
And then I'll walk back to the bench hoping that it works. And then when you throw strikes right away, everybody thinks that I'm a genius because it worked. Right. So I think your coach was concerned with how it looked to him more than what the experience was for you. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the problems that we have. Coaches get fired very quickly. Everybody's an expert now. And again, that's the proliferation of sports that are available to people. They listen to commentators and not play-by-play people, but analysts. And they'll talk about how this is a wrong decision and how they should have done this. Well, that's something that people pick up. And then when they go to games, they do the same thing. So, and the other thing that, I love to watch ESPN, but ESPN is always the highlight. It's a highlight reel. And not every game is a highlight. They don't show the entire game. They just show the key moments of the game. They don't see that a pitcher struggled in the first inning. They're not showing that, or how they came back, how the pitcher gained confidence as it went on. As a pitcher, there's a lot of times people come out of the bullpen, they think they have nothing, and all of a sudden they pitch a great game. Or they need a couple of innings. You look at even the Yankees this year. Derek Cole was horrible in the first inning. He gave up more home runs than he ever did, but he would settle in. And if they're having to do that in the pros, my goodness, a coach on a lower level has to be able to do that. Right.
Was there ever a very difficult situation that you witnessed in youth sports that you just shook your head and it's like, why is this happening? How could this continue to happen?
Well, I'll tell you one of the most embarrassing things that I've ever seen. I went to a state tournament final, and I'm sitting in the stands with fans from this particular school. The bases are loaded, and this catcher, who's probably their best player, gets up. He dropped his bat along the side of the cage. They warm up with a heavier bat, and the bat fell down. His father went down from the bleachers, readjusted the bat, so it was leaning against the fence, and then came back and spoke to us and said, I waited my whole life for this situation. The kid hit a dribbler in front of the plate. Catcher picked it up, stepped on a plate, throw to first, double play. You waited your whole life for this moment for your kid. It's his experience. I would love to have heard the conversation, because that was the last out on the way home.
Wow.
I'm sure it was not pleasant for the youngster. Feels like he let his team down, and then he's got to hear from his father about it. And we're sitting in the stands thinking, man, it's not about you.
Yeah.
It's not about you.
Right. It seems like a lot of these parents are living through their kids, especially if they didn't have those experiences or did and failed to reach their own expectations of it. And it's difficult to see because they're putting that unnecessary pressure on their own kid.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that happens is they start to compare their kid with other kids, which they really shouldn't do. No two kids are alike. I don't care what anybody says. And so some people have a different rate of development, and some people have a different skill set. But they're sitting next to somebody whose son is succeeding. And that person may have gone to a clinic over the summer. So I'm sitting next to this guy and I'm thinking, you know what? I better get my kid a pitching coach. When I would give talks to parents, one of the first things I would say to them is, your kid's performance on the field has nothing to do with you as a parent. If you have the best player, you're not the best parent. If you have the worst player, you're not the worst parent. The only thing that matters is the kid coachable. And that's a direct reflection upon you. If the kid's not coachable, that's something that he's learned at home. But I think the comparison comes in the fact that people feel that if I'm not doing everything for my kid, if they show the least bit of talent, I really got to work through that. The other part of it is that there are lots of cash cows in our culture. And by that I mean people who run club programs, AAU, etc. And they're in it for the money. And they'll make any promise. You know, I'll say, listen, I'll give you a lot of opportunities to pitch, and we have a number of people to come and watch the games. I'm not promising you anything, but you think that that's a promise, and people are plunking down $5,000 for a week at a particular camp, or they're hiring a pitching coach who charges $150 an hour, because I've got to give my kid everything so he can compete with the other kids. We used to call it keeping up with the Joneses. Now there's so many people who are successful, we can't limit it to one person.
And it seems like nowadays too, a lot of people are getting talent confused with being a leader. And just because you're a very talented athlete and you're successful, maybe you're the team MVP, doesn't necessarily mean that you're the guy with high character, high values, and someone who could pick up the other teammates. How could coaches, parents, and just overall players who are on that team recognize who that leader is and who they should really trust, even if that might not be the guy who has the highest batting average or hits the home runs?
You know, that's a good point. I think the past is always prelude to the future. So you look at what a person has done in the past. If I'm a varsity coach on any level, because that's my program, I'm watching freshmen, I'm watching sophomores, and I'm looking at whom do the players gravitate to? Who's the one who speaks and they listen? So when it comes to the senior year, I'm picking that person as my captain because I believe that that person represents the same values that I possess. I'm not letting kids vote. I've gotten to discussions when I run clinics for coaches. Well, I want to let kids vote because then they'll vote for somebody to listen to. That's nonsense, okay? They pick the best player. I think there's pressure on the best player, and it's very hard to be a captain as a best player because you have to be concerned with your output. If I'm the best scorer on a team and I'm averaging 20, and my coach tells me, well, we need you to score 20 points a game, then I need to focus on that. My role on that team is production. So I don't have the time to watch what everybody else is doing. I can't monitor what's going on the bench, whether people are into the game. I can't look at their body language. I can't tell whether or not they're into the game or not. So that's why I didn't always pick the best player. Now, you don't punish the best player because if the player is a leader, that's fine. The other thing is there's different kinds of leadership. You know, people would always accuse Jeter of not being a real good leader because he wasn't very vocal. And his response was, "You don't see me in the locker room." But everybody looked up to him. And look at Judge. They made him a captain not because he hit 62 home runs, but his name is never in the paper. When the games are over, he goes home. He doesn't showboat. He throws the ball into the stands, playing catch in between innings. He's never bragging. He's not pounding his chest. He's not gloating as he's running around the bases. So there's a lot of things to like in him as a person. And he had the same qualities that Jeter did. Right. So that's what you look for in a captain. And I think one of the things that you can do is you look at past behavior. Because if you pick the wrong captain, it could cost you your job.
And it seems like those types of captain figures, those leaders, are able to handle adversity and failure pretty well. So for the players out there, the young kids, high school, youth baseball, wherever, if they're dealing with adversity, tough situations, how do you think they should respond to it, and how could they get better at it? Because it's not easy when you go 0 for 4, 3 or 4 strikeouts, and you're a kid. You want to succeed, and the parents want them to succeed as well, coaches, everybody involved. So they feel like they're disappointing their team and themselves. How could they face that?
Well, the key word there in all of that is the coach. If you teach a next play mentality, then the next game mentality, you're not the first person to fail. Babe Ruth struck out more than anybody, and he hit more home runs than anybody at his time period, and he saved baseball. Pete Rose has the most hits. He made the most outs. A lot of times you fail because you've taken a risk. Okay? Now, everybody talks about how great Jeter was. I didn't think he was a great shortstop. He made all the plays right at him, but his range was very limited. Now, if you limit the range, you're not going to make errors. But if you try for every ball to make a play, you're going to make errors. So the greater the risk, people say the greater the reward. But the greater the risk, the more chance there is for failure. You know, you love baseball. I think there's no other example where you can point it out. You can fail in baseball 7 out of 10 times and make the Hall of Fame. You know, you can't shoot 30% in the NBA and make it to their all-star team, but it's 70%. And so I would tell you there are other ways that you can help our team. You might not be hitting the ball right now. So maybe I'll give you some extra hitting after the game. Okay? I'll try to give you more experience and try to encourage you. And everything is temporary. Some guys, you look at major leaguers that have gone in slumps and then they turn it on the second half of the year. You're not helping us if you internalize it. If you're not hitting and you're going 0 for 4 and you're not up on the fence rooting for everybody else, you're sitting in the dugout having a pity party for yourself, then you're hurting us. If you go 0 for 4, that's not hurting us. We'll have other guys that will go 0 for 4 as well. It's just one game, one day. It doesn't define your ability, and it definitely doesn't define you as a person. What defines you as a person is how do you deal with adversity. And I think one of the things that you can do is you can show kids videos of people who've dealt with adversity. And on my video that I made, Professor John McCarthy has a plan to save youth sports. I have a tremendous example of somebody who overcame a lot to become very successful. So I think you have to take the pressure off the kid and say, you'll get it the next time.
Before we wrap up, decades and decades of coaching experience you have dealing with coaches, parents, players. Is there one message you'd like to send out for youth sports in general on how they can maximize the kids' opportunity, performance, and just to overall have fun and enjoy it?
Well, as Yogi would say, what does the kid want? What does the kid want? If the kid really wants to be good at something, he'll put time into it on his own, and he'll work to get better. If he doesn't, he won't put the time in. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe he doesn't need necessarily be the best, but the best players are the people who work the hardest. And I think first, what does the kid want? And the second thing that you develop in, which is a life lesson, is a next play mentality. Okay, I didn't do it today, but I have tomorrow. One of the best things about baseball is it does recur. In football, you have to wait another week. But in a lot of other sports, you can do it. So I think track and swimming and summer sports have an advantage because you can always go for your personal best. So if my time in a 220 is whatever it is, every practice I can go out and work hard to beat that time. In baseball, it's a little bit harder. In basketball, it's a little bit harder to measure those incremental things. So I think you have to be patient. There are a lot of people who think that you have to need to start this right away. There are some guys. Quincy Doobie got a scholarship to Rutgers and got drafted in the first round of the NBA. He didn't play basketball until he was a senior in high school. You know, not everybody comes out of the womb with a bat in their hand and a glove or a hockey stick. It takes time. And I think that we have to be more patient. What do kids want to do in a sport? They want to have fun. They want to play with their friends. They don't even know from winning until the coach puts it in their head or the parents put it in their head. 75% of all kids drop out of sports by age 14. I didn't make that up. Why do they do it? Answer that they give, it's not fun anymore. You're a coach, you got to make it fun. And it can't be about you. It's about the kids. And finally, the most important thing is it's about the relationships. It's about the relationships because that's what lasts a long time. The wins and losses, people exaggerate them. You know, I hit 20 home runs. The next 5 years, I hit 30 home runs. And nobody really knows and nobody cares. But are there people that you're hanging around with still? There are people that you go to their weddings, that you go to picnics with them, or you follow what their kids are doing. The relationships are what it's really all about.
Great stuff. Coach McCarthy, appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
All right, thank you.